plan my lessons for the next unit. I like to start with my materials. I have a pencil, a highlighter, and a pen. I have my lesson plan paper. I have my teacher's edition. And I have my pacing guide. So the first thing I'm going to do is look on my pacing guide and see what unit we're doing. We're going to do Unit 6, which is Call the Police. So I'm going to write that on my lesson plan. I'm going to look at my calendar and see that my next class is Monday, October the 26th. So I'm going to write that in the date. And then on my pacing guide, I see that I'm doing the unit opener on page 82. And I'm doing lesson 1 on page 84. So I'm going to write those on the top of my lesson plan. I'm going to review the homework from last lesson, which is workbook pages 41 through 45. So I'm also writing that in my lesson plan. Now I'm going to go to my teacher's edition, and I'm going to open it up to Unit 6, Call the Police. I'm going to read through the pages of the lessons that I'm going to teach, which is the unit opener and lesson 1. I see here that they suggest that we start the unit by introducing some valuable items. They say a picture of a van, a personal photo album, magazine pictures with people. I want to use some valuables that I'm going to bring from home because I like to put the materials out on the tables for the students to look at as they come into the classroom. So I'm going to make a note here. The materials needed are valuables from home. I'm going to bring my phone, some keys, some money, my Nook, maybe something like that. Something I wouldn't want stolen from my house. And here where it says opening activity, I'm going to write display valuables for class discussion. So I want to engage them right away and get them interested in thinking about this unit. So I'm going to put some things out and we're going to start talking about those. That's my opening activity. The next thing on my lesson plan says vocabulary. So I see here on page 83, there's a list of vocabulary words. And then there's also in this lesson 1, which I'm doing, some vocabulary words on page 85. So I'm going to list those in my lesson plans. It looks like the ones on 83 are related to the home. Here's lock, key, light. So my vocabulary is going to be home vocabulary, page 83. And then it's going to be valuables vocabulary, on page 85. Those are computer, VCR, replace, important. So those are my 2 sets of vocabulary words. The next thing my lesson plan asks for is my lesson of the day concepts. So if I look on the first page of the unit, all the concepts that are going to be taught in this whole unit are right here. But not all of these concepts are going to be taught on my day. I'm only teaching the unit opener and lesson 1. So I'm going to look through my lessons that I'm teaching and see exactly what concepts I'm teaching. Okay, so I'm teaching the home inventory vocabulary words. I'm teaching past tense statements right here on page 85. So that's going to go on my concept. And I also see at the bottom of that page 85 that I'm teaching the long and short I sounds. Long and short I sounds. So I now have my vocabulary and my 2 lesson of the day concepts. Those are grammar concepts. And it looks here like there's also a life skill lesson. On page 84 it says take a home inventory. So I'm going to put down, besides the grammar concepts and the vocabulary, I'm going to put life skill, take a home inventory. Now I've read in here that they have some suggested activities. There's one here that says the idea map, but they have a picture of it in the student book, and I don't think I'm going to make a different idea map. I think I'm just going to use the one that they have in the student book, so the students can go ahead and fill theirs in on this page as well. So I'm going to look in the student book and see if it's actually big enough and if it looks like it will work for my purposes. And there it is. And there's some extra lines. So I'm going to use this one that's already here in the book instead of making another one. But I do want to have an active engagement piece for my students. So I think I would like to take the picture dictionary words at the top of page 83, key, lock, radio, door, TV, and play hot seat. That'll be a good way to get them up and out of their chairs and doing something fun and reinforcing our vocabulary. So down here at the bottom on my lesson plans, in my notes, I'm going to write make hot seat game cards, because I'm going to have those, and I don't want to forget that. And I'm going to make put a sticky note in my student book here to remind me that when we get to that page, I want to do that activity with the students. I was also reading in my lesson plan book on lesson 1 where it says, what a mess, that they have a suggestion here to ask students how they know the answers to these questions. We're going to talk about this picture on page 84, and then there's a short story, and then there's some questions at the bottom. Now, I understand from my teacher's manual that they're wanting students to start thinking about where in the story are the answers to these questions occurring? So I'm going to remind myself that I want to talk to them about that. So I'm going to take myself another sticky note, and I'm going to put right here, how do you know? That's going to remind me that when we're talking about this picture and reading this story, I want them to make a connection between the questions and the text. It looks like we're going to be practicing was and was not, and were and were not, weren't, wasn't, and we've talked about contractions in previous lessons. So I don't feel like I need to put too much emphasis on contractions again. My students were doing pretty well with that. We've had that in at least 2 previous lessons. But I am concerned about their pronunciation of the long and short vowel sounds. So at the bottom of page 85, it says we're going to do an activity with pronunciation target, long and short I sounds. And I'm supposed to read these words or play them on the tape player, CD player, and they're going to listen for long and short I sounds. And they give some examples: quiet, night, window, missing. Those are the words I'm going to read. Now I'm still thinking, I've had one activity where I got students up and involved. We did hot seat. But I want another activity. We've done 2 more pages now since we had that activity, and I want to get them out of their seats again. So I'm going to do a T-chart on my whiteboard with long and short vowel sounds. So over here on my lesson planning page, under activities, I've got hot seat, and now I'm going to write T-chart with long and short I words. So now I've got 2 activities to get them up and out of their seats. I try to plan 2 for each lesson at least, so that they're doing something engaging and not sitting too long. Up here on materials needed, I'm going to write stickies. That's these. These are my favorite little things. Actually, for the students, I'm going to use this size. And I'm going to put stickies with long and short I words. So when I draw my T-chart on the whiteboard, like this, then they can bring up their sticky and put it on the short I or the long I side. So that's something I need to write down here in my notes as well. Make vowel sound sticky notes. So I don't want to forget that. So now I've got my 2 active engagement activities. We're covering the grammar concept. We've got the phonics part. I'm going to look over here at the writing activity on the next page. And our writing activity is going to be take a home inventory. It says make a list of things in your home. So depending on my time, when I get to this is my last page, page 86. This may be an assignment that we do in class, or it may be something that I'm going to decide to carry over to the homework. If I'm running out of time, that's a good one. So I usually pick something in my lesson that I can skip or move. because you can't count always on being able to fit everything in. So I'm looking carefully at my lesson and deciding what can I either not do because it's a repeat of something we've already done and I feel like my students are not needing a lot of practice on that, or something that I can assign that they can do independently along with their homework. So the first page, the first unit check and lesson 1 usually has a shorter amount of homework. So I'm going to look back in my pacing guide, and it says I'm going to assign workbook pages 46 and 47. So I'm going to write that down here on extra practice. Workbook pages 46 and 47. And then I'm going to put next to it, I'm going to write task 1, page 86, question mark. We might get to that in class, but if we don't, I know I can assign that for homework because they only have a couple of pages in their workbook. Now, besides my pen and pencil and highlighter and sticky notes, I like to work with my computer as well because I can go in and find some masters that I might want to use with my lesson. So I'm going to go to newreaderspress.com. I'm going to click on ESL Citizenship and go down to Core ESL. Then I'm going to click on English No Problem because that's the curriculum I'm using right now. And then I'm going to choose Free Resources. And I got a long list of free resources here. So I'm going to go to Book 1, Reproducible Masters, because this is level 1 that we're working with. And I'm going to scroll over to the unit that we're studying, which is Call the Police. So I'm going to look at my choices of activities. And here is a grammar lesson using was and were. And it says use after lesson 1. So I'm teaching lesson 1. So that would be an appropriate activity that we could do in class. And it involves some writing. And I like to include always the 4 pieces in my lesson are reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So I think I'm going to use Activity Master 53. So right here on activities, I'm going to put Activity Master 53. So now I have, besides the things in the book, I have 3 additional things for them to do. I have the Activity Master, I have the Hot Seat Game, and I have the T-chart with the long and short I words. Up here on my materials needed, I'm going to write 12, because I have 12 students, copies of Master 53. Okay? Now, I think I've got a pretty good amount of things to cover in the time that I have to cover it. I'm going to look at my literature because we always end with a story. Remember, it's important for our students to hear English language, the prosody, the pronunciation, the inflection, the patterns of the language, the vocabulary, and I love for my students to see some really good quality children's literature. I know all of my students, everyone that was in my class, wrote as one of their goals that they wanted to help their children. And as we know, the best way to do that is to read to your child. If you have never been read to, or no one has ever modeled reading for you. You don't know how to do that. So I'm going to tell my students, here's a book about police officers. That's our unit, Call the Police. It has some realistic pictures in it. It has some simple vocabulary words. And if your school library here doesn't have this book, they will have another good book about police officers that you can share with your children. So I'm going to list this here on my literature. It says here in my pacing guide, I'm going to read A Day with a Police Officer. Now, my lesson plan is finished. What I need to do for my next piece is I need to go back and make sure that I've got my long I and short I words. And I like to just stick those directly in my book. So I've made up a list of long I and short I words, and I know I'm going to use it on page 85. So I'm just going to stick it right there. And when I come to that page, then I can pass out one of these to each student, and we can do the activity on the whiteboard. I need to make sure that I have my 12 copies of Master 53, so I'm going to print that out and make some copies of it. And I need to make sure that I have the hot seat words. So that's the next part of my lesson plan. I'm really finished planning my lesson. The only thing I have to do is pull together my materials. And I want to make sure when I walk into that classroom that I have everything that I'm going to need to have a successful lesson.